All right, let's continue on this Thursday Classics. I almost said month. That was back in August. Thursday Classic album. This is where I look at a classic album from a notable prog band or just a notable prog album from a prog band. This one we're actually looking at the first category. We're looking at an album from Yes. And I feel like this album doesn't really get the notoriety that it deserves. You know, it doesn't really get the same kind of pomp and circumstance that a lot of their albums get. So let's dive into one of my all-time favorite albums from a founding father progressive rock band. Magnification by Yes. So, Yes, I don't think needs an introduction at this point. As I mentioned, founding fathers of the progressive rock movement. Now, in the 80s, they kind of went a little bit pop with the, restructuring of the band. But in the late 80s, early 90s, with the Union tour, I feel like because there had been so many band members at that point, that literally you could tour two bands by the name of Yes and have enough members to fill out both bands. They decided to kind of like reevaluate and restructure and find out what worked, what didn't, and kind of go from there. And I feel as though, the first couple of albums after that, Talk and Open Your Eyes, were... but I think that the latter, the 1999 album of theirs really did see a return to form more so than I think any other prog band has ever had. I feel like they took what they learned from the latter and applied it and even went further with Magnification. And we have, most of the core group back on this one. John Anderson on lead vocals, Chris Squire on bass and rhythm and backing vocals, Steve Howe on lead guitars, and Alan White on drums. They didn't really have a keyboardist for this one. Rick Wakeman was out on his own, and Igor Kososhev, I think it is. Koroshev, the fellow that they had for the latter, couldn't make his return. So instead, they just filled it up with a full-on orchestra. And that's always what I said. When you can't get Rick Wakeman, the next best thing is a full-on orchestra that was, orchestrated, arranged, and conducted by Larry Group with Bruce Donnelly and Frank Macchia. Again, I can't pronounce these names to save my life. But one of the things that I love about this album is they weren't scared to do longer songs again. And I mean, they had done a few tracks that were a little bit longer in the past, within the 90s and 80s. But this was the first time that we were getting songs within the 10-minute mark. We had songs like Dreamtime and In the Presence Of and Give Love Each Day that is still in the rotation now in live performances, specifically In the Presence Of. And one of the things that I really do love about this one is the band utilizes that orchestra to not only fill out the song, but also breathe new life into a lot of the orchestrations that they've had. I mean, back in the 70s, they were called a symphonic prog. They were one of the first to really get that symphonic prog moniker on their playing styles because of how grand and how big and how lush the sound was. So it only made sense for them to partner up with a orchestra for this particular album. And I love how they are able to really build up songs, really evolve tracks. And you can see that right from the title track of Magnification, where it starts off in this one vein, spends a couple of minutes in it, and then completely changes into this other track altogether. And I really have to tip my hat on to Chris Squire. His bass playing, his harmonies, his rhythms on here really do drive this album forward. And you see that on the title track of Magnification. He has allowed the space and the time to really hammer out and provide the heartbeat for all this. I also think that Steve Howe on tracks like Spirit of Survival and We Agree showcase that he can still shred. He can still lay down a tasty guitar lick, a tasty guitar riff, as well as just shred it all out. Like he is taking a piece of paper and making confetti of how quickly he is shredding. And John Anderson's vocals on here are just heavenly. Don't Go is one of my favorite tracks on here, and it's a quick, punchy one. It's only 4.5 minutes long. It's a very crystal clear like radio single that we would get from like the 90125 era, or even something from like the Yes album or Roundabout, or it's quick, it's punchy, it's immediate, and then it just kind of goes on its way. But also on Give Love Each Day, the follow-up, the fourth track. His vocal works, combined with Chris Squire's harmonization and Chris's bass work on here, is one of my absolute favorite tracks from Yes. I think it's one of the best tracks that they've ever written. It's so emotional, it's so heartfelt, it's so personable, and it's also so honest and genuine as well. Like, so much of progressive rock at this point, this was 2001, was very like dark and dreary, and we either got too much repetitive styles or it was new, very dour stuff. So to have something new and something so genuine was, a breath of fresh air. Now, this does kind of, I don't know, it gets a little, I don't want to say the word cringe, but it is a little cringe, especially when you get to tracks like Soft as a Dove and Time is Time, kind of like the interlude tracks, especially as well as Can You Imagine. These tracks range from about 2 to 3 minutes, and I don't really know if they add too much to the runtime of this album. It just, I don't know, it feels a little bit filler. It feels a little bit too John Anderson-y in like the 80s, where he was doing a lot more of that like more poppy approach to it. But I wanted to leave a little bit of time with the two closing tracks outside of Time is Time, the last track, Dreamtime and In the Presence Of. These two tracks go on for over about 10 minutes. And man, these are the quick, succinct epics of the album, and they hit one after another. Dreamtime, the ending work with that violin orchestra, hits so friggin' hard, and it's punchy, it's powerful, it's commanding so much of that more chaotic version of Yes back in the 70s with like Gates of Beryllium. We're feeling a lot of that like Tales of Topographic Oceans with like Giants Under the Sea. It's so intense. And In the Presence Of goes through so many different vignettes and a lot of different territories to really provide like, as I mentioned, a succinct epic in that sense. And at the end of the day, Magnification has some of the best music that Yes has ever really written. Probably ever, I still continue to this day to return to it, and I'm floored by the fact that it never really, got the time in the sun as a lot of the other albums did. And we still see them performing tracks like In the Presence Of live today. And it wasn't for another 10 years that they would put out Fly From Here, which was just another fantastic album within their repertoire. So yeah, Magnification shows that, a band in their twilight years, even though this album was put out over 20 years ago, if you can imagine, they still are kind of at the peak of their game. They're still able to crank out some of the best music that they've ever written. And I feel as though it kind of gets overshadowed because it was written so late in the game. I still think that 3-album punch of the latter, Magnification and Fly From Here, great run of albums within Yes's twilight years. They probably should have stopped after that. So yeah, that's what I've got for Magnification. As I mentioned, if you haven't figured it out, one of my ultimate favorite albums from Yes. Yeah, that's about it for me. As I mentioned, I'm not going to rate any of these albums because it just is a little bit redundant. I mean, he's a classic for a reason. I want to shine the spotlight on some of these albums. And yeah, I also, like, if you haven't checked out Magnification or you haven't checked it out in a while, I think now would be a great time to do so. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. So yeah, that's about it for me. What do you guys think about this album? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Whatever you thought, please let me know by commenting down below. And that's all I've got for you guys. I hope you guys have been enjoying my classic albums. I'm trying to get back on the bandwagon for that one. I did, which one did I do last week? Gentle Giant. I did their 3 Friends album. I might do Octopus in a couple of weeks. We'll see. But yeah, that's about it for me. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.